evening, everyone. My name is Daphna Rabinovich, and on behalf of the Giller Foundation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's book club. Please make sure to have your Zoom on a side-by-side view for the best possible experience. It is with absolute delight that I get to introduce you to our interviewer tonight, Josh Whitehead. Joshua is a two-spirit Oji-Nehiwa member of the Peguis First Nation. He is the author of Full Metal Indigiqueer and also the author of Johnny Appleseed, which was longlisted for the Giller Prize, the Indigenous Voices Award, the Governor General's Literary Award, the Amazon Canada First Novel Award, the Carol Shields Winnipeg Book Award, and won the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Fiction and the Georges Bugnet Award for Fiction. Josh is currently working on a third manuscript titled Making Love with the Land, to be published with Knopf Canada, and which explores the intersections of indigeneity, queerness, and most prominently, mental health through a Nehiya lens. Tonight, Josh is going to be interviewing Conor Kerr, author of the 2022 longlisted and wonderful novel, Avenue of Champions. Like always, we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Josh will be reading them during the last 15 minutes of the interview. And without further ado, I give you Josh and Conor.
Thank you, Daphna. Thanks for joining me. A little later than expected. I had strep throat last week, but I have fully recovered and I'm fiercer than ever. And we're going to get deadly tonight with Conor, who I want to introduce. So Conor Kerr is a Métis Ukrainian writer, which also I just learned the term Ukrainian, which I love. Anyways, back to the bio. Métis Ukrainian writer, a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta, and is descended from the Lac St. Anne Métis and the Papas-Chase Cree Nation. His Ukrainian family are settlers in Treaty 4 and 6 territories in Saskatchewan. He grew up in Saskatoon, Edmonton, and other prairie towns and cities, and is currently trying to move back to Edmonton. Alberta needs it. Alberta needs it. In 2022, he was named one of CBC's Writers to Watch. He's the author of the poetry collections An Explosion of Feathers and Old Gods, as well as the novel Avenue of Champions, in which we'll be discussing tonight, which comes from Nightwood Editions 2021, which was shortlisted for the Amazon Canada First Novel Award, longlisted for the prestigious 2022 Giller Award, and won the 2022 Relit Award. Most importantly, he has a forthcoming novel, Prairie Edge, which will be coming out in April 2024. Hello, Conor. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Likewise. I feel like we've come full circle because I was also the jury member for the Amazon First Novel Award. That's when we first met.
Yeah. And I was laughing when I think you need to update your bio a little bit there, because Making Love with the Land is very much out and very much a beautiful book as well. So just wanted to
there's too many bios in the world. Making Love with the Land is out. I'm very excited to be talking here today. As I was telling Daphna in the green room, I don't think an hour is enough, but we'll try to fit in as much as we can tonight. So I just want to remind folks right off the bat that there is a Q&A select box or section on the bottom of your screen. You can pop all of your questions in there. I will try to get to as many as I can in the last quarter of our conversations tonight, but don't be shy. You can also send anonymously if you'd like. I still know that the option is there. And I'm very excited to jump in. But first, Conor, I'd like to maybe ask that you regale us with a short reading from Avenue of Champions.
Sure. And I'm not going to lie, I find it hard to read from this book now because I have, other books coming out and I'm like, ooh, maybe I can read something from one of these new ones. But I will go back to Avenue of Champions here and start off with a story that's kind of from the middle of it. And just read a few pages from it. Context kind of around it being that a young Métis University student is dealing with a little bit of a situation in his personal life that impacts his university experience. There are bed bugs in my apartment building, so we have to flee fucking post haste. I pack my roommate's cat up in her little crate and hop into my inheritance from old Auntie Doreen, a blue 98 Chevy Lumina. We barely made it out before they had the white and blue bubble wrap covering the building and the chemicals pumping in. The landlords can speak English when they need money, but when they have to tell us to evacuate, fuck no. Then it's straight Eastern European language. Told us about 5 minutes before all these exterminators arrived, looking like astronauts and stomping around in the building. Push everything out from the walls. They kept yelling like we had all the time in the world. I think the plumber yelled the same thing last time the building flooded out. We're ground floor too, so all the shit from the 3 stories above us floods in. I told the landlords to call a plumber a few days beforehand when the sink was gurgling and spitting, but nope, couldn't understand what I was saying. Wasn't speaking in dollars. But shit, what can you do? It's all slum words everywhere. My English prof told me once that Thomas King wrote about stories and it's all turtles all the way down. Well, this is slumlords. It's fucking slumlords all the way down. So anyways, I drive my car from the Avenue of Champs down to the university area. Thank God I put some change in the gas tank on Monday, discount day at the Domo. Usually this car is running somewhere between the empty needle and a little below. I ditched my car outside the residential parking restriction zone and hightailed a 15-minute walk to campus. It's cold, like my balls have gone back inside my stomach cold, and it's an innie. The cat's purring away in her little crate, little cutie. At least she's having a good time and not getting gassed up right now. My roommate found the cat in a field back at Buffalo Pound. She named her Prairie, fitting because my roommate's always off on some trip. Her dad's some rich oil dude that would rather pay for her to disappear on flights to foreign countries than see her hanging out with a bunch of Métis boys on the Avenue of Champions. Anyways, Prairie and I make it to campus and people are looking at me like, why the fuck is that guy walking around through the humanities building carrying a cat? And I see them snickering. All the other students without cats in crates. And it occurs to me for the first time that this might have been a bad idea, but I didn't think about it. I never think about it, unfortunately, until it's a little too late, but whatever. I smile back. I got nowhere else to go, and I don't want this cat to get fumigated or freeze to death in my car. So we're both going to hit up my Indigenous Literatures 309 class. The cat might get more out of it than I will, because right now it's back to those slumlords in my mind. Why do you have a cat with you? Professor Gladue asked me. Why wouldn't I have a cat with me? This is what I wish I had the confidence to say. Instead, I mumble something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I can leave if you really want me to. No, it's fine. Just sit in the back, he replies. I head to the back as she instructs and take a seat. Professor Gladue is very intimidating. Knows a lot about everything related to the Cree and the Anishinaabe and Métis, and I assume everyone else. She's from out east. Some Nishrez, I think, though there are Gladues all over this area too. She's maybe a year or two older than me and has these deep, dark coal eyes that suck me in and spit back the fact that I've been wearing the same clothes since the last class 2 days ago, and I'm now carrying a cat around with me. Part of me wishes, okay, all of me wishes that I had my shit together and compress her with a story or a poem or something. Instead, I got a cat and half a pack of Canada Goose smokes from Enoch. After last semester, when I was placed on academic probation, I had to have a talk with an Indigenous student support advisor, some shit title like that. Sometimes I feel like my entire life is just talking to these people. She told me that since I had a unique circumstance, they would work with faculty to accommodate me. We understand your struggle and want to support you. We don't want to lose you to the system, the advisor says. That's why you're on academic probation. Okay, I said. But I was thinking, I don't know you for shit, and who's this we, and what system? This whole university is a system, and I'm already lost to that one. I'm just riding my children's services funding that I got from those couple years in the group home before Granny got me and Charlie until it runs out. Part of me wishes I could get a scholarship or something to keep riding university courses after, but no one's funding my sorry ass academic probation self. But the catch was that in exchange, I had to only take 3 courses. I said, sure, what else do I got going? What else was I going to say? And what else do I got going on? And now I think the only reason this prof is letting me be in her class is some email telling her that they have to accommodate me. But whatever, at least class is a spot where the cat and I can hang out. I honestly don't know where else we would be right now. No one sits by me, but no one ever does. I'm that kid. I used to be popular back in our ghetto ass high school and during summers back at Buffalo Pound. That kind of popularity doesn't translate to the university though. Here it's all about the money and not being the smelly guy, reeking like old cigarettes, plastic bottle whiskey, and old Milwaukee's and carrying a cat. Who's thinking that dude's the shit when he's got a beautiful prairie cat with him. No one's hanging by us. No one wants to smell us. It's all good. She just chills, purrs a bit, goes to sleep. Makes me wish someone was carrying me around. I'd reverse our roles in a heartbeat. Then I should think, shit, I just wish I had someone to go to right now, but I don't. One time we were having a party in the building and a couple of the neighbors opened up the doors to the apartments to join in. Whole hood was there. I'm even talking about the boys who lived in the bushes in the middle of the traffic circle and the ladies who worked around the baseball bat. Great party. Somehow no one even called the cops and we kept it going late. But at some point, since all the apartment doors are open, the fucking cat gets out and I'm scrambling because I can't find her. And my roommate, she's going to kill me if this cat disappears. So I'm running around yelling about this cat. My neighbors are all like, what are you talking about? Thinking I'm methed out or something. You know how it goes. But I need to find this cat. She's not an outdoors lady, not in our hood. She'd be gone in a second or smoked in the traffic circle. Splat. Problem was, I'd had a couple Scooby snacks and I'm pretty high while I'm doing this. I run into my neighbor's apartment. He's got the rock out and random scattered on his couches. He's got the pipe to his lips. Buddy, you see a cat? He puts the stem down for a second. Yeah, man, thought that was some stray. Tossed it back out the window. He lifts the stem back up and smacks up. I look into the black void outside the window. The void's pulsing, breathing black into the room. I give my head a shake to try and clear the drugs. Oh, damn, man, that's my cat. Oh, shit, dude, buddy yells. Everyone's up. Let's go find the cat. Everyone who's high on rocks starts and hanging out in buddy's apartment reluctantly gets up and we all head outside, this train of deplorability that won't be able to find anything. I keep muttering, but I'm thinking this cat is dead. I'm a little upset, man, even though it's not my cat. She's basically my best friend at this point. I don't really got anyone else. Turns out the cat was right outside the window, just right sitting there, right where he threw her. Buddy runs over and scoops her up. Everyone yells out a cheer. Buddy passes the cat to me and we head inside. I boot a couple people out of my apartment, locked the door and called a night. Later on, someone took an axe to the door, but when they realized it was the wrong apartment, they got out of there. Now there's some nasty slash holes in the door, but it looks pretty deadly, actually. I'm going to end it on that one there. Thank you.
Hella deadly. Thank you, Connor. I reread this book basically yesterday, just to kind of get refamiliarized with it, and it's such a beautiful, complicated read, which I hope everyone gets a chance to read it in here. And I guess first and foremost, I want to maybe ask that Edmonton plays the primary character, I think, in this book, beyond the protagonist Daniel, who you're reading from here, with the most apt named cat ever, Prairie. I love it. And it's a kind of never really seen roommate, right? But yeah, maybe for the people who aren't familiar with Edmonton or Alberta, do you want to maybe explain the prevalence of Edmonton in this? And there's a few sections I want to talk about and maybe define what the Avenue of Champions is, because it's not just a title, it's an actual space and place too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to me, my family's from the Edmonton area. My grandmother's grandmother was born on what was the Papas Chase Reserve before they illegally lost it in the surrenders of the late 1880s, when Edmonton was or the federal government was really trying to colonize the prairies there. And so my grandmother's grandmother being born in a time when the matriarchal Cree governance structures were still very much in place in the river valleys of Amiskwaciwaskahiga, Edmonton, creates a lot of connection for me back towards a city that, is now built up in this urban construct. And I think of that lady in particular often. And my grandmother, who was raised by her, is very much alive. This is very much a living memory history. She's 91, does 10,000 steps a day, and just got a new boyfriend named Wilfred. He's got a car. She's pretty impressed about that. Takes anyways, but this living memory that's within this space and within this area. And I think about my grandmother's grandmother quite regularly, because she grew up in what would become Edmonton as a child, when it wasn't Edmonton yet. There was a fort, there was the res, there was that wasn't only a res for a tiny little bit, but really before that, just a community. And then she was kicked out and they left and they went to these road allowances north of St. Paul in the bush up in northeastern Alberta. And she lived there for her entire life until she was in her 80s, I think, and they moved her back to Edmonton when the family kind of came back. And I think about what that would have looked like for this this woman, my relation, to have, you know, been away from this space and then for so long, and then coming back from when it was legitimately a fort, a couple houses, and like that's pretty much it, to this time now in the 1950s, 1960s, where there's the skyscrapers, there's a legislature building, there are bridges, there's a city of, at the time, you know, 300, 400,000 people in this area that before it was just Cree and Métis kind of territories there. And the what that would have been like. And I feel that forms a lot of the book, and just the thinking about what that kind of memory and the memory of land really constitutes for Indigenous peoples living in a space where you might not necessarily be recognized within these landscapes. But at the end of the day, underneath the concrete, our blood runs deep into the land that's there. The memories, the blood, the laughter, the tears, all of it goes back into those spaces. And I really tried to, I mean, this story was more about the university experience, but I feel that book is really centered around that. And then within Edmonton, 118th Avenue, an area where I spent a lot of my younger years, is it's kind of a predominantly Indigenous neighborhood. It's home, you know, it's a beautiful space. The joke in Cree kind of culture is that if you throw a rock down the Avenue of Champions, you're going to hit a cardinal, no matter where the rock ends up. And it's a great neighborhood, and it's a neighborhood that's been forgotten by the city of Edmonton. There's been multiple attempts to kind of gentrify it over the years, with little uptake and little support. But at the same time, you know, it's got this beautiful community that centers around itself within these spaces to support, to create a livelihood, and for Indigenous peoples within a settler colonial world.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. Like, I thank you for explaining that to our listeners here, and the readers. You know, I was just in Edmonton about, like, not even 2 weeks ago. I have a dog. He's a res dog from my res Peguis First Nation, and I was taking him for a vacation because he's so spoiled. He doesn't realize, like, what kind of dog goes on vacation. But we got to kind of swim in, like, the North Saskatchewan River. He had never seen a wave before from boats going by, so he, like, lost his mind. He had a great time. But I got to, like, visit that, you know, and walk by, like, the Friendship Center, and, you know, see the end of the world, which I want to talk about a little bit later too. But Edmonton is just so alive and vicious and vivacious in this book, and it's just so beautiful to see. Not only Edmonton in its current state, but its historical living memory too is still, like, not haunting, but prevalent, right? It is there. And so, okay, I want to jump in. This book reminds me of, like, not the same, but within the same perhaps milieu of maybe Eden Robinson's Son of a Trickster. I'm getting, like, Cody Caetano's Half-Bads and White Regalia vibes. And, you know, if I had read this, or you had written this back when I was, like, touring Johnny, I did this talk with Eden Robinson and her main character, Jared. I was like, my Johnny has such a literary crush on your Jared. I feel like they would be, like, best friends, maybe like late night lovers. And I feel like Johnny would love Daniel just the same.
Yeah.
So in thinking about a character like Daniel, you don't come across these kind of characters too often in our lifetimes. Like, I know my character Johnny sat with me, like, well over a decade, kind of like fattening like a leech from all of my memories. So I'm curious maybe how Daniel came to be, or came to, you know, be enlivened through you as a writer.
Yeah, I have a bad, my middle name's Daniel, so I have a bad habit of just using the Daniel as, like, my, like, you know, literary, like, alter ego, even though very much this book is very much a fictional book. And I have to explain that to a lot of people often, regularly, where people are like, I can't believe that all happened to you, and that's your like, no. This is, like, there's elements of truth within story, but this is a fictional, like, book based around, you know, some things, but, like, it's not real, it's a fiction. There's a reason it's not a nonfiction, like a memoir style book or anything along those lines. But I 100% relate when you say that, you know, like, I had to think about this for a while, and I like, because really, like, a lot of this book is based around, like, kind of my experiences and experiences of my friends when we were in our early 20s trying to navigate the world as young Indigenous people in a space, you know, where, like, we were privileged to be in, you know, post-secondary, where a lot of people don't have that kind of connection. And I've always felt privileged to be able to be I'm going to retract that statement. You know, the university was privileged to have us there, not the opposite way around. But I did feel privileged because I've always been connected to my grandmother, a very strong, formidable Métis woman, and the cultural teachings that come from her. And, you know, I've brought a lot of my friends around, friends who didn't have that same kind of connection to that, that's been lost through colonialism and intergenerational trauma over the decades. And so we would, you know, but I had to still like think about like what that navigation of a worldview really looks like, and what that navigation of worldview and mindset really looks like for Indigenous peoples who are trying to, you know, just figure out what the hell this Western society really like wants from us. And like towards that end of Avenue of Champions, when, you know, Daniel's now kind of in his middle ages and he's like kind of disillusioned with the whole like notion of the work that they've kind of done, and his whole choice to get into like a government style bureaucratic career, and that there's really been no kind of like, there's been very just tokenized kind of progress made towards creating an equitable like future that really truly values Indigenous peoples. And I mean, that's something that I very much have gone through my like working life, but something I'll probably explore in future works as well. But like, yeah, it was just such a, I couldn't have written this when I was 22, 23. That's for sure. Like it was too fresh, too raw. Like I had to wait a long time. And it wasn't until actually Marilyn Dumont, an amazing Métis poet, kind of kickstarted me in a class I was taking from her, just kind of for fun, to get back into the writing scene. And she kind of kickstarted the first story in the book, The Last Big Dance. And I wrote that for her book, and after, or for, not for her book, sorry, for her story or class. Then afterwards, that story just got like everything else going for the book. You know, I was just like, oh shit, I'm good to go now. I got a story. Yeah.
No, I definitely see that. Like, I think like the bake sale in this book, which is one of the chapters, it is the longest chapter in this book. And it is the only chapter that kind of is within a really structured frame of time, right? We jump from, you know, prehistorical accounts from OG Granny, as you call her in the book, living in the bush, right? Being a slinging moonshiner, which I love. And then, you know, we jump from child Daniel to teenage Daniel to young adult Daniel to like 30-year-old Daniel working in these kind of government positions. But it's funny to me because like the bake sale sets up the whole stakes of the book. Not like it really consolidates. It kind of, it's like gravitational force that brings all of these characters together. In which, you know, we learn that you're like this Daniel's Nookum or grandmother is like making wheat brownies and like a very successful business, giving it to folks, you know, in her old folks residence, which I love. I love.
Yeah.
And I was a little curious about this chapter, or maybe just like about structure and temporality in this book, because we're jumping back and forth. And, you know, in 1 minute, Daniel's, you know, in undergrad school, and Professor Gladhu's like running into him at Tim Hortons while he's temporarily homeless, right? Yeah. Next chapter, he's fully graduated. But the bake sale is so grounding. And again, like I said, the longest chapter, at least page length. And I remember like when I was writing Johnny, there was like very intense scenes and chapters, which seemed to be kind of, yeah, the gravitational force or the motor. I'm curious, like, was the bake sale, was that for you?
Yeah, I am. Well, to tell you the truth, like the bake sale was like, the novel wouldn't happen without the bake sale, really, you know, and that was, I wrote the bake sale though, because I was really broke and I wanted to go bird hunting in Saskatchewan. And I, was trying to get some money from literary contests, and I like specifically targeted the Malahat Review's like novella award. So I wrote it like very much for that, and then it got longlisted. I never won it, but I got longlisted, and then it ended up actually when I kind of re-edited a bit, submitted a shorter version for a Prairie Fire or Grain, I forget which one. And it ended up finishing second in that one. So I got like $500 or something, enough money to go pay for a couple tanks of gas and go like bird hunting, so it did its job. But if like taking an editor lens to it now and being a little bit more of an experienced writer, to tell you the truth, I would have probably structured the rest of the book into the bake sale and made that the entire like novel in a way, and kind of just like got all the characters really going within it. But the bake sale chapter itself, I feel, is like that's the one that, you know, yeah, it's half the book essentially. It's like, it's very much I came to it with the intention that I wasn't going to, and I very much intentionally thought of that, write Indigenous women as stereotypical characters, because I feel that comes across very often, especially for older Indigenous women who aren't given agency or aren't given voice or aren't given kind of narrative. They're often either used as props or tokenized kind of like cultural, like elder women, but they're not really given agency or the ability to have their own voice. So in this one, you know, I got this granny who is let down by her grandsons, who aren't, so she decides, you know, that even though they're kind of like not able to provide, you know, what she kind of like needs, and this is in terms of like supplies for her to make moonshine, I'm pretty sure, she decides to get into selling weed instead. And so she does that on her own. She goes to the library, she gets, you know, figures out with the librarian's help how to make weed brownies, starts slanging them out of the seniors home, and like it's very you know, and then I was very intentional with that, like she's in her own agency to write her own like future and her trip out to Vancouver Island to like retire basically out there. And I really wanted that to kind of ring true. And I also wanted to ring true like a bit more of that Indigenous experience, once again, like I was saying about like the young people, like kind of trying to navigate there, you know, like Daniel's trying to meet this one lady at the pub they hang out at, and his granny is just like kind of just like getting involved in the entire conversation at the same time as they're hanging out there together. So you're like, you know, you got this like Dan's trying to be smooth and his granny's making fun of him, and then like the other character Cheryl, the young Cree server, starts also making fun of him, and it's just this whole like, you know, rolling event that you see playing out all the time actually if you're ever like hanging out in those kind of like bars or pubs. But I was like, I gotta, that's just too good of a thing to kind of like try to capture there. And I also was pretty intentional on like creating a character in this chapter who was basically like doing incredibly well within the academy, within the university, but was able to see through all the flaws and the tokenization within an Indigenous studies department, and was able to, you know, kind of help the navigation of that university system as the one person who was able to do so without all the supports kind of that the post-secondaries claim to have in place too. Yeah.
No, most definitely. Like Cheryl, I love. Like, fun fact, when Daniel goes to the pub to ask out Cheryl, who's like this beautiful, beautiful Cree woman, and she's very fierce, like all the Isquayu I know are. And his grand comes, and they're like kind of both like ragging on Daniel, and then Cheryl's like, "Oh, I'll give you my number. What's your password?" And it's 6969. It's like, so Granny's like, this grandson of mine, wild. Which I love. And then Cheryl and the Keisha as well in the university, I think it's like that foil to like seeing through, you know, like the TRC and like the buzzwords of decolonization and reconciliation. And I love that kind of portrait that you painted of these women. And like maybe I want to like pivot a little bit into thinking about the men in this book, the boys and the men. Because, you know, often, you know, you're talking about these stereotypes that we see of Kukums in our books as like, you know, objects of knowledge that are just like kind of plot devices sometimes. And on the other hand, like I think to last night with Billy Ray Belcourt and, you know, Wab Gijig Rice talking about the two paths that Indigenous men can sometimes take, at least in a minor chorus. One of which is like remand centers, the second of which is like university. And, you know, you have a kind of a trio of characters. We have Daniel, and then we have his brother as well. But then we have two of his friends, Jason, I think being, and Alex, but Jason, I want to kind of focus on a little bit. And Jason perhaps goes the remand route, right? And there's a scene, one with such profound insight and storytelling and kinship that really, I think, encapsulates Indigenous masculinity, not strictly as being just toxic or violent, but also caring and loving. And I don't want to spoil anything here, but we do find out that Jason kills someone in this book and is taken into custody and eventually imprisoned for it. But he's a character, he's an addict, he's an Indigenous man who grew up as an Indigenous boy with Daniel, you know, with CFS and with kind of foster care, right? But he's haunted by two metaphors, the mosquitoes and the bear, right? And you write, before he he isn't Jason, had mosquitoes inside his veins and a bear on his back. And then again, every bear had to swallow 1,000 mosquitoes. Every bear had to sprint forever with the mosquitoes buzzing around in its stomach trying to escape and to get back into Jason's veins. And I'm curious, can you elaborate a little bit on these metaphors and how they
Yeah.
become maybe like an avatar for Jason? Because he's so caring, especially as a kid when he's taking care of Daniel, right?
Yeah. I kind of forgot I wrote that. That's a good line. I'm gonna like, I actually kind of forgot about that. I'm glad you pulled that out. I love that when I was writing it, and I remember chatting with a friend of mine a while back, and he's not. I think he's doing all right now. I haven't talked to him a bit, but he used to describe his addiction as feeling like when he was going through like withdrawal symptoms as all the mosquitoes in the world like inside his body and inside all of his veins trying to get out and buzzing around and biting. And I remember just like that image when my friend told me that is such a like a profound like haunting, yeah, same thing, like hauntingly kind of like beautiful description and such a poetic description of addiction. And when writing about like this character Jason, like I kind of wrote in the like within my mindset around like the bear as not necessarily a savior. I think the savior tropes are very like almost within a Western like Christian, pseudo-Christian like methodology, but more so within like the bear is, it's a part of the natural world, but it's a part of survival. It can be harmful to you, it can be helpful to you, it can be angry, it can be loving, it can be caring, it can be like it's an animal, it's got its own instincts, its own tendencies, and it will go within that, but it can also and I think that was kind of what I was trying to really like portray within Jason here. Not so much a choice, because I didn't give Jason a choice. He never had any choice in the way that his life went. And I think, and I did that like, kind of on purpose, because for a lot of Indigenous men, they don't have a choice in the way that their life goes. There's never a moment, where it's like a pathway, like, oh, if I had just done this, things would have ended up different. That never exists. That option doesn't work within this world. And often, and so, you got people like Jason who've never had this choice to have all the mosquitoes within their veins, but they can still, and but the bear can kind of have the potential to either harm them or to kind of carry them at the same time. Yeah, I like that line. I might bring that one back. But I'm kind of interested too in what you were mentioning there as well, because I feel there's almost, and I'm going to explore this in a future book, not Prairie Edge, but the one after that, where there's almost this forgotten level of Indigenous masculinity, and I'm for with the work I do, have to talk about quite a bit, where we always have the warriors, we have writers like you have writers like yourself and everyone else, and all these like people who are like, and everyone's like, oh, why every Indigenous person should be like a writer or a thought leader or like publishing articles or protesting or like hanging out, like really like a warrior trope, like everyone's got to be like at this like high functioning like level, or they're an addict, or like not doing well. But then like I'm not gonna lie, like 95% of my friends are blue collar dudes who are just chilling in Edmonton, supporting their families, hanging out. They're not thinking about, what they're thinking about providing supper for their kids on a daily basis from their job, digging power line trenches for like power companies in the suburbs, they're just as Indigenous as everybody. They're Métis, they're Cree, they're Dene dudes. And they're never talked about, because you have to be in one level or the other. You've just we always just tend to glance over this like huge portion of actually like Indigenous masculinity, where men are just working, just supporting their family, just hanging out, but they're living within their lifestyle, and they're not becoming public spectacles within that, in regards to one way or the other. And I think that's something that we need to really like, not like, but just to recognize that, we from a settler Western gaze, we often forget about a lot of like I would always use this, right? Like there's 100,000 Indigenous people within commuting distance of Edmonton. Do you really think that all of them are unemployed? Do you really think that all of them are like not working, or that all of them are living your stereotypical image that you've been like created because of the shitty media in this country, or are the vast majority of them just living, you know? But like, why would they come up and like talk to you about that? Like, really, like, you're not gonna come with strangers and talk about your power line job. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think like, and sometimes I think like, you know, the spectacle that we become as writers, and like no shade to anything, I love what I do, but it almost becomes like betraying almost to like my own like, you know, Nehiyao and Anishinaabe laws of like reciprocity. Whereas like my father, you know, is a 60 scoop survivor, and you know, I have him, his mother, my grandmother was murdered in the 60s in Saskatoon, and he's been in and out of remand and in and out of foster care his whole life. So I really resonated with the story here. But he's a truck driver, right? And he was an essential
Yeah.
worker in the pandemic. And like to me, like him, and like, you know, I also position the women in my family are like philosophers, they're theorists, they're storytellers, right? To like break open that like reign of warrior, because it's like power hierarchy, it's hierarchical instead of cyclical, right? They
Yeah.
are that. And I really love the kind of renditions that you kind of gave to all of the characters in this, but primarily the Indigenous boys and men, which is beautiful to see. So thank you for that. I really need to thank you.
Yeah. I
And there's,
I
oh,
always
sorry.
laugh, like I'm just kind of anecdotally going on, but like
Yeah.
if you ever want to be put in your place, like if you start thinking like you're getting a little too like high up, like talk about some of these things with like your like friends and family who don't really like think about these. Like I know when I like was like excited, you know, like, oh, I got nominated for the Giller, like it's a huge literary award, and then my like cousins are like, ooh, the Giller, like that's a thing, and I'm like, no, 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 it's actually is a big thing, and they're like, sure, it's a big thing, and you know, and you're like, they're like, oh,
For
that's
real.
a Giller author, and they're just making fun of you like constantly, and they're like, you know, and
I
like
mean, yeah, nothing
yeah,
humbles you like family. Like
oh,
you
totally,
can
my
like go
granny,
home. Yeah,
she's
yeah.
like, your stupid little stories up for another whatever, and then she's like, but one time I got 29 in crib, in a hand of crib, and
Oh.
she'll talk about that to all her friends forever, like, yeah, my grandson, he got 29 in a hand of crib, great, you know, he's the best, he's my favorite because of that crib hand. And yeah, we'll never
Uh-huh.
talk about any like books I wrote or anything like that. That crib hands, that's the one.
It's true. You want to get humbled, go home. Like I'll
Yeah.
go home and be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so exhausted. I was just in like New Zealand and Australia. Had to go to Vancouver." My sister will be like, "Okay, calm down, Oprah."
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, okay, folks. I know we're getting towards the time for Q&A. Don't forget to get them in there. Um, I kind of want to return to Cookums, to grannies. And there's two grandmothers in this book. OG Granny, the moonshining, slinging, badass bushwoman. And then you have the kind of urban granny, also Patsy is her name, as we learn later. And there's one quote that I just absolutely love. I had to share to socials today, in which Granny, towards the end of the book, is kind of musing. And she says, maybe then I wouldn't have lost her to the cities, talking about her daughter.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
would have done well in a different time. Charlie, Grandpa, my girl, Granny, even Daniel. But the cities, one day we're all young, listening to our uncles tell a story, and the next we wake up old with skyscrapers all around us, all in one lifetime. What kind of world is that? Why can't it be slow? And I guess I'm curious to ask you, like, what you think, because this is apocalyptic in a sense. It's world ending, right? But then there's also so much recreation and creation happening in this, which we should have hopefully have time to talk about if we do. But yeah, just kind of really curious of like maybe how doom or finality or apocalypse or ruptures emerged in this book for you, because they are there, but it's not tragic. Like I think of like Robin Maynard and Leanne Simpson in their book Rehearsals for Living, who said like not all world endings are tragic, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious about if you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And I very much remember actually kind of my like thought process along kind of trying to build up some of that. And I was chatting with Chelsea Vowell, who wrote a great book, Buffalo's the New Buffalo, as well as a ton of other things. Chelsea's amazing. And anyways, when Chelsea was talking about how we were chatting over coffee one day in the old Norquest College Indigenous Student Center, and she was telling me about like how we're living within our own post-apocalyptic society as Indigenous people right now, you know, that our apocalypse has already happened, and that this is, you know, our post-apocalyptic society that we're living in, and within these like within the Western construct that's been placed upon us. And I think about time within that idea too. You know, we have such a linear viewpoint on time, like this date, this time, you know, we're within this month, we got to do this for work, we got to show up at 9, we got to leave at 5. And there's such a rush to create what I like consider like the ideal like federal Canada existence of a 70K salary and a post-secondary degree and a home in the suburbs and a mortgage off the yin yang with the bank. And but we don't think about what like a good life actually is, like Mio Pamatsu in like Cree, like what a good life, what is a good life, and what does a good life look like in terms of like the time frames that you're moving within these spaces that you're existing within these cityscapes. Because like the city can also be a very beautiful thing. Like I'm with a colleague of mine right now, and you know, he's an urban Mi'kmaq guy. Like he's like from Toronto, he grew up in Toronto, he loves Toronto, like Toronto is his space. Like he doesn't want to be like a proposed stereotype of someone like being like, hey man, you need to go hunting now. It's like, I don't go out to hunt, I hang out in clubs like in Toronto. And like, and that's not, and it doesn't make me any less or more indigenous. Like it's just who I am as a, you know, it's just who I am. And I feel we often tend to try to like impose like just these stereotypes on people, but at the same time, like if they want to live like within that, that's their right too, and that's beautiful and that's a great thing. But I also like, just for myself personally, within a lot of my like my family's worldview, which is very much like the only ones that I can kind of like speak towards, or and it's very like centered around like how do we exist within the things that we love to do while we have this constraints of like a Western like societal approach on us. And I think often of another cousin of mine who works as a hunting guide and a seasonal forest firefighter, which unfortunately is very busy this year. But like and then he just like hangs out and supports his family. Kind of we were chatting about like last year, and like in the Canadian society, he is a failure. He's below the poverty line. He's, you know, he doesn't have any education at all. Like, don't think he finished grade 7. And he's just like, you know, he's just but in like the community eyes and like our family eyes, he's the man. Like he's an incredible hunter. He's always got food for his family. He always provides for them. He does that for all the elders, the aunties, the uncles. Like he feels like a skip the dishes delivery guy driving around dropping meat off for everybody. Like it's like he's but he's found a niche way to exist within the world that he wants to exist in without those societal constraints. And I applaud him for that, because not many people are actually able to do that. We feel like we have to catch the buzz of the world. We have to go to, you know, New Zealand and Australia and Vancouver and Edmonton and all of those places. Like even like hell, I'm in Montreal right now, and like I don't want to be in Montreal. I want to be on a prairie. Like I want to be looking at the North Saskatchewan River and just hanging out and not worrying about rent. Yeah.
Very, very fair. I mean, like when I'm in Toronto, like the most hunting I do is like going to Powwow Cafe, you know, in Kensington, which sadly it's closed, but it was the bomb while I was there. But oh yeah, I totally understand all that. Like thinking about like yesterday with Billy Ray Belcourt and with Wob, they're talking about like, you know, giving stories to the res narrative, right? Because often we privilege the urban, but I think it's just as important to like have that balance, and that's so encapsulated within Avenue of Champions. I'll ask you maybe one short little question too. First, I had to like kind of make fun of you. If I don't know if Emily Riddle or Jason Purcell are here, but y'all love to write about magpies in Edmonton. I don't know what's going on. Let's make guys be wild.
You gotta. I if anyone's ever like my first poetry collection, which is very much juvenile, I wouldn't recommend it. Pick up the second one, Old Gods. But An Explosion of Feathers is like half the poems are about magpies too in it, you know. Like, Premi Muhammad's book, sorry, I can't recall the title off the top of my head, but it won or was up for a couple of awards in Edmonton last year, and it's got like a magpie on the cover of it as well. And we were recently on a panel together, and I was telling Premi that I was like, I love your cover. And
Yeah.
you know, we always talk about, because magpies are such a force within the city of Edmonton. And I one of my favorite like images is like there'll just be like after Wednesdays, there's just chicken wing bones everywhere, all over the city. And like I remember being like kind of like, why the hell are there chicken wing bones everywhere? And then like, why is there a chicken? Because my dog's like in the backyard, like chomping down on a drumstick. And I'm like, where the hell did you get a chicken wing bone? And it's because of magpies. They carry them around. They like go and like raid through the garbages, and especially after Wednesday wing night, and like drop chicken wing bones all over the city when they're done picking away at them. And I apologize because I don't actually know whose quote this is, and it might be Emily Riddle's. But someone told me once that magpies are constantly mourning the loss of the bison because they moved in harmony together. They, the magpies lived with the bison herds. They like were like they rode around with them. They cleaned them. They ate like the bugs that were on them. They helped keep them clear of ticks and all of that, and that's how they got their food. And so the magpies moved with the bison herds. And then when the bison went away, the magpies are bored and lonely and angry, and that's why they're causing so much mischief and chaos within these cities there. And I'm gonna just do my own kind of shout out. My next book, Prairie Edge, is very much about the bison returning to Edmonton. And I don't think there's many magpie references in there, but they'll enjoy that the bison are back as well.
Yeah.
You gotta have a magpie. You gotta have a magpie of some sort in there. Like I got a magpie tattoo, like right there. Like, yeah.
So I love it.
Got a woodpecker for Papa's Chase and then a magpie. Yeah.
Perfectly avian. I love it. Magpies wake me up every morning. They're always outside my house. She chases them around. But I have heard that story too about the magpies mourning the buff. I forget who told me that.
Yeah,
I should look back.
I should really find out who told, like, because I should properly quote it. That's for sure. Yeah.
I do know it was someone from like Northern Alberta. I'm thinking like Chelsea or Emily, Chelsea Bauer, Emily maybe.
Yeah.
But they rotate, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So I do see some questions in here, but because we're all book nerds and just kind of promoted the Giller, I know I talked about Emily Riddle, her book of poetry, The Big Melt, highly suggest, Jason Purcell's Swollening. But Conor, like, what are you reading these days? What's giving you joy?
Yeah, I like to throw in one non-Indigenous book, and it's Jonathan Escoffery's If I Will Survive You. It did incredibly well in the States last year. It was actually it reads a lot like Avenue of Champions, but a Miami version for second generation Jamaican kids down there, but very similar style. I was fortunate to hear Jonathan Escoffery speak at the Vancouver Writers Fest last year, and I was just like blown away by this book. And I've read it probably 2 times through already, and it's just very similar language, very similar, like, not the slang, but the very similar like style of telling the story like we're having a chat, basically. And really like that book. Emily Riddle's The Big Melt, which you mentioned. I also loved Matthew Weigel's White Mud Walking, very Edmonton book as well. A couple magpie references. As what you mentioned, Eric Cody Catano's Half Bads and White Regalia. Incredible story, once again, of a different form of, a new take on Indigenous masculinity, a new take on what it means to be an Indigenous person living within a modern like context. Jessica John's Bad Cree, which isn't magpie but crow based, so we're up a little bit. But that book is I'm sure everyone, it's already been up for a few things, and I'm sure it will be up for many more. Very incredible book as well. And yeah, I think those are those are kind of my main ones that I've been kind of cruising through in the last little bit here.
I love it. We've given our listeners like a little library to read. I think we can tell like we're like huge book nerds. I love it. Okay, I want to get to a couple questions. Thank you, folks, for popping them in there. If you have more, pop them in. I'll try to get through as many as I can. But we are like Indige folks. Like we are like aunties and uncles in the making. Like I always say it takes me like 3 questions to answer the question because I talk so much in circles.
Love a circle.
But we have from Nicole. I really love this book, Conor. Thank you for writing it and sharing it with us. I was very curious and enjoyed with the varying point of views and even past versus present time in this book. How much did you experiment with this while writing?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, when I was talking earlier a little bit about that, like that construct within time being such a linear, like kind of notion, and I think back to even like that storytelling, like legitimately what you just mentioned with like the circular notion of that. Often, you know, stories within stories that'll will wrap back in together, but it might take a little bit to get to the end result that's there. And like I'm not gonna lie, this book is a collection of short stories that were written for lit mags that I was trying to, you know, build up a CV to get it published at the time and to get someone to look at it. And so most of these, but then trying to tailor it later on when I was working with the editors at Nightwood to make like more of a coherent novel to it, created really that opportunity to look at, like, you know, this different, bringing different generations together within a different context and what those stories can really like look like. You know, like halfway through, you got like halfway through, you got Granny's now a young woman talking with OG Granny when she comes back to Edmonton and gets dropped off there, and they talk about, you know, the city lights of the skyscrapers as they look out from the old res grounds on the south side of the river. So I really enjoy kind of messing around with the form. I honestly find like a very, like, unless it's like a straight up thriller action, like go 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 go, then I like to see a bit of, you know, like of a past and future tense, and it doesn't always need to be so prescriptive in what that looks like, but it can take a more a different approach to storytelling, bring in that oral storytelling even if it is on the page.
No, most definitely. It's like fully run in Indian time, which if you don't know what that is, and I'm using Indian. We're always late to our own becomings. We're late to bingo. We're late to dates. We're late to snakes. You know, all of that. But it's for our own good because we're outside of settler time. And the book, I think, prefaces that. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Connor. There. I have another one from Jesse. What up, my relations? I prefer Kerr's cat over Schrodinger's cat because I know it's alive and well. Meow. What would the cat have to say about the professors and university staff who are most adversarial to the protagonist, Daniel? Massey Cho, Jesse.
I think Jesse just, I'm not sure, so I might be completely wrong on this, was just up for the Audible Indigenous Mentors Circle Award with Richard Van Camp, if I'm
Oh, okay.
correct. I remember reading that recently. Anyways, thanks. I love a good Dene connection up in here.
Always a
and,
Dene, yeah.
ooh, I always like, that's a good question. I think they would be like, the cat would be, well, the cat would hate the institution and having to be confined within a cage, which is kind of a good metaphor to like that whole, honestly, going through like a university experience there. Is very much like the stifling, like on a, like my experience, the stifling of creativity and original thought. I know it's supposed to be a place for those kind of things, and it can be with proper mentorship, but not in 2006 when I was at the University of Alberta, 2007. At that point, it was very much about kind of survival, and I think the cat would be really mad at the security guards who eventually kicked them out of the library and send them to the Tim Hortons Wendy's combo, when all the other students are allowed to kind of hang out in that space. And yeah, I also think they just wouldn't understand why the hell anyone would go to a place like this that just constantly devalues knowledge. I mean, I really shouldn't say this because I'm like about to take on a professor gig at Alberta in the fall in creative writing, but like, yeah.
I mean, I also teach. I'm like, I
full circle.
critique the academia as you work inside it.
Yeah. Going full circle.
Yeah, that moment where they get kicked out and there's like people like watching porn on the computers and like studying. It's like, can I just study? Like, good Lord, if I fall asleep, right?
So that actually happened. That was very true in my life.
Really? Okay.
That specific. That was very true. Yeah.
There's always like stuff going on in the library on those computers. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank you, Jesse. We have one from Bertha Rose. Conor, what subjects did you like the most in your schooling? Also, what books others than yours should I read? I'd like to learn about various Canadian cultures. I'm a retired teacher and a grandmother. I appreciate that you mentioned about your grandmothers. Good for you. Thank you, Bertha.
Oh, yeah.
We talked a little bit about the books, but yeah, like maybe what subjects did you like best?
Yeah, the grandmothers run the show. I don't think anyone would doubt that anywhere. And like I was just on Vancouver Island on that same flight schedule, you know, hanging out with the same granny from this book who is very much still making moonshine in her assisted living building, like I mentioned earlier, and selling it out of there. And interestingly, we have a good Ukrainian Métis connection going on out there, because my Ukrainian grandfather goes and harvests all the blackberries that he can possibly find. And then he brings them to they're from the separate sides of the family too, brings it to my Métis grandmother who lives a few buildings over, and gives her all the blackberries so then she can make moonshine for everybody. And they call it blackberry bounce. It's terrible. Don't drink it if anyone offers it to you. I like to explore like that. I think we often try to monolith Indigenous peoples into one kind of like, this is Indigenous literature and this is Indigenous like peoples across the board, you know, but the experiences are so vast between Dene writing, Gwich'in writing, Haida, like you know, Hunkaminam, like up to Mi'kmaq, like there's so many like Indigenous peoples exploring and sharing voice and story, from these urban landscapes to these rural ones, to these, from the prairies to the oceans to the north to the and to lump them all into one experience devalues it. And we should look at each one for what it brings to the kind of like the cultural context as we build out and move away from the Canadian imposition that we're all one, and that tired old trope that they've tried to create for a long, long time, and see the beauty and the nuance of what that really looks like as well. And so those are like, yeah, those, and then I mentioned a few of those books. Most of those are pretty prairie based that I mentioned earlier, but I think that's still, yeah, I think it was just the kind of exploring within that. And honestly, like I find it funny when people like, and this is honestly me working in academia for a while, when like professors who are like, you know, supposed to be really smart people, me bashing academia again, professors maybe be in like a faculty session, they'd be like, how do I learn about Indigenous literature? How do I learn what to read? How do I learn about the TRC? I'm like, honestly, dude, just fucking Google it. Like, it's right there. Like, you are a professor with like at this place, like, just Google it, man. Like, and I think that, you know, there's such a, in the last few years especially, there's been such an explosion of good media that's been Indigenous kind of led and based around what to read, what to bring out there. And so I always kind of try to keep my eye on the list too. And that's what I really enjoy doing. And because like, I don't know personally a lot of the writers that are putting books and works out. And I love reading, like, you know, these random lists that are out on Google, like on the, like, and I mean, even honestly, the Giller Prize, like I get books right off of that thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you for that. I also love that, you know, your cooking still like in Vancouver and like has these Ukrainian kin. I thought it was so important too, because in my res, we grew up right beside a Ukrainian colony, and like the Ukrainians and primarily the prairie and ditch folks have like such a long history of kinship. Which is why we have kukuma scars, right? I was going to wear one, but my hair was just a mess today. So I really loved kind of, you know, the kind of perhaps beauty that you gave to, you know, the Ukrainian prairie indigenous experience, right? I think it's just, I don't often see it. So I also thank you for that too. Okay, oh, I didn't even realize the time. Oh my goodness. Okay, I talk way too much. I'm going to bring Daphne back, but I just want to thank you all so much for coming here. Thanks for putting up with 2 days of Giller book readings. Obviously, it's my favorite thing to do. I had such a great time, Conor. Thank you so much. I know it's probably hot. It's like the hottest couple days that are breaking global records. So if you're sitting in a hot office sweaty like me, thank you for bearing it. And I'll see you all in the future. Thank you again.
Oh my gosh, thank you both so much for this absolutely fantastic hour. Your humor, everything, it just was riveting. And for your honesty, Conor, and your generosity. And thank you everybody who has joined us tonight and has joined us throughout the year. This is our final book club for 2023, but we will resume them with the long list once our gala announcement is made in November. I hope you all have a wonderful summer. Thank you.